Okay, so hello, my friends. We're going to go over the questions that you have for me about Zelensky's trip to the United States, Canada, the United Nations, DC, whatever. So I asked you, what are your questions? And we're going to keep this to about 20 minutes. What I found is that for whatever reason, American politics get very poor views. When I do videos that focus on what's happening in the United States, I think it's interesting, and some small segment thinks it's interesting, but generally speaking, this does worse than others. So I'll go 20 minutes, and if you want more at the end, and the views are there, and you're asking for more, I'll do another one, completing whatever questions you have for me. Okay, so what are your questions about Zelensky's trip to the United States? I'll try to answer them in tomorrow's video. And so here's what I'll just start working through the questions here. I'd like to know which major lawmakers didn't want to meet with Zelensky. I already know the reasons why, but I'd just like to know if that's possible. Yeah, so there are a few of the regulars, right? So Marjorie Taylor Greene is, making noise, trying to drum up evidence of corruption and that kind of thing. She's about as MAGA as any MAGA Republican gets. She is just very far on the end of that scale. There's about 20 some odd members of the House that are in this caucus that is they don't like spending on anything like this because they just don't see it as anything they should be spending on. Then there's some in the middle that are, um, just that they talk about, well, we should be dealing with the border crisis and this other thing and that other thing, and that's okay. Some of them are hiding behind that, and some of them truly believe it. But you're looking at people like Ohio's new senator. I'm trying to remember his name, J.D. Vance, and others like that are just they're very squarely opposed to this kind of thing, and because philosophically they don't see it, they don't get it, they don't understand that this is very important. Um, yeah, so and so some of them won't make noise, and it's the usual suspects have been there for some time, but it's a very small minority. RT was making some waves about this with six senators, I think it was, and 20 some odd members of Congress have written a letter about this, and I'm like, you know how small that is compared to the whole of all of Congress? So, at any rate, how do I think aid shipments will start to differ now that summer is ending? Do you think that we'll see an uptick to aid to AA and other defense systems, like yesterday's 1.2 billion from the U.S.? Or will aid be more focused toward procuring more Abrams? Will they arrive this month? Armored vehicles. Um, Aid shipments now that summer's ending. So summer. Uh, so we really wanted to see some significant wins, and I talked about this in previous videos. If you start seeing significant progress, that changes the attitudes that you're okay. So Ukraine is almost like a corporation that has um, shareholders, and the shareholders want to see income. In this case, the shareholders want to see that there's some victories, and the aid will keep flowing as they see more victories. So I think it's not just about summer, it's about seeing more progress. I don't know if that helps. I know you wrote more. I actually looked at the this bit before. In other words, will Ukraine start becoming more defensive based this year, or do you predict multiple winter offensives? That I can't talk about. I really just I don't know. It's not like I'm trying to hide things. I just don't know how it'll play out. Okay, have you had a chance to see President Zelensky's speech? Yes, I watched a lot of this. So I watched the UN Secretary, I'm sorry, Security Council meeting. I watched part of, not all of, Canada's speech, and which was very similar.
Watched it live and was impressed. Canada and Ukrainian community have strong ties, and the left-right issue is more consensus-based than the U.S. I'll be taking another look at the content of the speech. I think he did a great job in Canada. I think the UN speech, he slipped in this little bit that kind of had an effect on irritating Poland, which I wish he would have left out. I don't know why he would need to talk about climate change or potential weaponization of climate in the UN speech, but okay, I mean that was insignificant compared to other things. The irritating Poland thing, that was an unforced error. The General Assembly speech was really good. He did a very good job with that. And according to RT, he even got to watch himself in the stands because there was this kerfuffle about how some editing had him sitting in the crowd of a speech that he was giving. So, okay, that was just poor editing and bad job on that part. But that was that came up again and again in Russian state media. What do you think about the net income of this triple B aside from the usual glad handing? Sorry. Okay, so he did get so spending the time with these people was a positive step, and I know that he had a better reception last time that he was in the United States, like where he got to speak, a joint speech before Congress, and he didn't have that now, but it was still positive. Still got to see one-on-one. Still got to meet with legislators. He still met with the top House Republicans, the top Senate Republican, House and House Republicans and Democrats. Still got to meet with the top Senate Republicans and Democrats. So he was still meeting with folks. It was toned down compared to last time, but it's progress. It's not. It's kind of like what's happening on the battlefield. Last time was the Kharkiv offensive, and now we're in the counteroffensive. Same thing here. Last time was just this huge thing, and now it's smaller, but it was still progress. So, um, yeah, he got walks away with another millions of dollars of aid package. Walks away with Canada giving a $600 million aid package. Yeah, it's spread out over a few years, but okay. Um, Addressing the UN was largely good, with the exception of the little bit that irritated Poland. And if you're wondering about the irritating Poland, go back to the video a few days ago. This scares me, and go see that. Um, they really need to work on making sure that rift gets sorted out. Um, yeah. Okay. So yeah, but I believe it was a net positive. My question is this: I left Twitter earlier this year when the platform was firmly in the hands of the NAFO brigade. I haven't followed the developments of the past 8 months on that site. How did X become infested with pro-Russians in a mere 8 months? Well, I mean, they were probably already there. So I wouldn't worry about that necessarily. I mean, you could say Musk fired half the staff and upgraded or disabled bot protections, but there were people that already had that sentiment that were there. Are there more of them? Probably, but that more of them is probably also related to that there are more Russian trolls in general just trying to be out there. Okay, I'd like to see you fact check Lavrov's statement to the UN Security Council point by point. Man, that sounds like a headache. Um, the translation was so fast in the live feed that it all just piled up in my mind, which is probably a propaganda technique to obscure. And that last point is probably pretty good. That there may very well be something to that, but that sounds painful. Maybe I'll do that, but that's I don't know. It just depends on if I have time or if there are other things that displace what I'm working on, like other events that displace being able to do it. How did he manage to be speaking on the floor of the UN while simultaneously sitting in the audience nodding to his own speech? Yeah, that's the will the real Slim Shady please stand up? So again, there was this big kerfuffle because some news, and I don't know if Ukraine put out this news or who put this out, but they showed him out in the audience while he was giving a speech. Like they cut to the audience for things, and they cut to parts that weren't actually clearly while he was giving the speech because he was in the audience. Okay, I mean that's an unforced error, but whatever. I mean it's not that huge of a thing. Dopey, yes, but it's not anything uh, bad. What do you suggest, Professor? I suffer from PTSD with lonely soldier effect. I feel like an alien on Earth. I want to be happy, a happy, non-caring civilian again. Um, wow, that's a good question. Let's see what the replies are here. The first thing that comes to my mind is that there's a lot of military folks that have this, and I'm not a clinical psychologist or anything. That's just not my field. But there are a lot of military folks that suffer from this kind of thing. You'll never experience the level of camaraderie and brotherhood and that kind of thing that you've experienced before. And now that you're um, removed from the military, you don't have those same connections. Those were necessary connections there, and they're not the same here now. Um, I think back to Dr. Menninger was asked, and he's a well-known psychologist and from years ago. If somebody suffering from deep depression, what do you suggest that I do? And he says, I would go across the tracks, find somebody who needs help, and help them. And what he meant by that is while you are helping, engaged in helping with someone else, reaching out to them, you focus not on you but on them. And there's something about the way that humans operate that while you're doing that, it causes something good in you at the same time. I'm not saying that this is going to cure everything, but there are other people that probably have things uh, worse than you do, and that you can actually have a positive influence in their lives and that kind of thing. Aussie Mocha said, seek an alternative, try therapy with animals, horses. Yeah, that's actually pretty good. Horses, for instance, are a great source of comfort. Hardest thing in finding a good psychologist that can help you understand the PTSD, how the brain functions around it, and how to train yourself out of a negative mental state. Smile as much as you can in public. Volunteer in community services. Life is worth it. Just let people listen in and listen to their opinions and stories. Aussie Mocha, your words are appreciated. You're right. Most civilian psychologists have a mind that is not suited to deal with war scenarios. Yeah, so I I'm sorry that I'm ill-equipped to be able to answer better than that, but yeah, finding the right help is really important. Okay, Bruce Ingles. But yeah, Bruce, I reach I put out here on the community board a Flipgrid thing where you could ask a video question, and Bruce was the first one to ask that. I didn't put that out into a video, but I did answer there on Flipgrid. So if you want to ask me a question in a video format, and if it's something that I think is useful for a video, I'll show you asking the question, and then I'll answer it. So it's on Flipgrid, and you can go back into the community tab and see that there. Bruce said regarding organizational leadership, the UN must be an anomaly. It's not goal-driven, but rather procedural. Such makes it palatable to members. You're actually onto something here. That's right. How can such an organization increase impact without devaluing the power of negotiation or representation? How is it that republics are more effective than the UN? To me, it seems like the UN Charter is more of a guideline. Okay, so Vlad Vexler actually did something really masterful. I can't point you to the exact video, but it was very, very right. The UN is powerful because it's not powerful. And to the degree, uh, it's a weird thing, but to the degree that you increase the UN's power, you actually make it less palatable to many countries around the world. It is a negotiating body. It is a body to talk about things. It's a body to communicate, to work through things. But if you start to give it actual power to enforce things, that many countries are going to be jealous of their autonomy, and they're going to pull away and leave and not be part of it and that kind of thing. So so it has to not have teeth. I know that sounds weird, but that's the way the UN actually works. Um, and so its lack of real power is what makes it okay for most members to say, okay, well, they can't necessarily tell me what I have to do anyway, but they can. It's kind of it's almost like the court of public opinion, where they can increase pressure in significant ways other than direct enforcement, and so that's where the value is. I hope that makes sense. Um, some people will understand that and feel, okay, I get why that's important, and some people would, no, they just ought to enforce it. Well, if it can do something to them, they can do something to you, and that's where people are going to be like, ooh, I don't know that I really want that to happen. Okay, but no ATACMS. Well, not necessarily. It looks like ATACMS have been discussed. They've been in the process. They're possibly on the way. They're not necessarily, or maybe you're going to get a couple or something along those lines. I keep seeing changing discussions about that. Um, what I keep hearing from sources that I trust, and I don't mean like I have specific sources, like I have a guy in Washington. I just mean open sources that have proven themselves over time to be trustworthy, or like ATACMS are in process, but it'll be part of a broader escalation when Russia escalates. Like if Russia declares mobilization, okay, you're going to that next step. Here are the ATACMS. And I don't know if that's the case, but that makes some sense. I'm not sure why it has taken this long, but they're everything but Biden's final yes, as far as I understand. Okay, I am certain that I have heard many expressions of gratitude from Ukraine from the very beginning of this invasion. Why is the narrative still that Ukraine has not adequately thanked the U.S. military for financial assistance? Is there some super secret special word that U.S. politicians are still waiting to hear? Is the aid being framed as a gift with the amount at the discretion of the bequeather, or the assistance to reach? So there's going to be a segment of the American congressional population that is just opposed to this. Now, a few of them have drunk the Kool-Aid and are just opposed to it for any reason. The Marjorie Taylor Greene faction. She's not going to hear any reason about it. And then there are some that are, and there's a larger segment that's going to be like, well, where's the accountability? And Ukraine has been associated with corruption legitimately, and then as well as Russia ginning up the narrative for many years, but particularly recently, Russia's been ginning that up. So then there's a larger faction that's like that, and Republicans really are generally focused on accountability as more than Democrats are for fiscal things. Generally speaking, that's it's a stereotype, but I think there's something there. Uh, so there's a small segment that's just against it for any reason. Then there's a larger segment that's hey, we need to have accountability. And so I think you get the thank you thing mixed up in there. I don't know that there's a huge narrative about that, but um, yeah, I mean they've said thank you many times, but depending on who you're listening to, they can spin it. And I think if you look at it, it's probably people that have spun it a particular way that are they're not just not grateful. I don't know. Okay, let me get to one or two more. Was Zelensky actually referring to grain trade with Poland, or was he talking about something else and people are misinterpreting what he had to say? And he said one word, Poland. And was Zelensky actually referring to, did Poland actually stop supporting Ukraine, or is that nonsense? Okay, so Poland, I think, felt snubbed by something that Zelensky said, because the grain. Okay, so you had the and go back to this. Actually scares me, that video, because I talked about this extensively. Poland felt snubbed, and Zelensky's speech indirectly referred to, but somewhat clearly referred to Poland and other nations. Now, the short answer is They were selling Ukrainian grain and the international on the European market. It hurt Poland's farmers. The EU checked that and suspended it for a year, and the suspension fell off. Poland maintained that suspension after the suspension fell off. Poland reinstated it just for Poland because they didn't want to hurt their farmers, and then um, the Ukrainians went to the World Trade Organization with a lawsuit against Poland, which was that's not smart. Okay, Poland's been your best friend. Don't do that. I know that you want to sell your grain, but just leave that alone. Don't try to sell that to Poland. Um, I think this was an unforced error, and they can heal the rift, but there's an unfortunate rift. And I've seen now in Russian media them play up the rift. Will Poland stop supporting Ukraine? Poland doesn't want to. Poland's telling the United States to get rid of Zelensky, and all kinds of stuff like that in Russian state media just in the last few days because of that unforced error. Okay, I've said it was only going to go 20 minutes. It's now 21 minutes. Thank you for your time. If you want to see more, put it in the comments. I want to see that if this video gets a lot of traction, I'll do the rest of it. And just, I want to answer questions, but I want to answer questions that people are really interested in. All right. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, the coffees, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.